The infinite route. Lucas Grant knew every street in Houston by heart. The endless rows of suburban houses, the chaotic downtown traffic, even the potholed backroads that seemed to resist repair. He'd driven them all in his Amazon delivery van. His job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. He liked the routine. Scanning packages, dropping them off, and watching his progress bar inch toward completion. It gave him a sense of accomplishment, however small. That Thursday began like every other. He climbed into his van just as the morning sun started to heat the pavement, the scent of fresh coffee lingering in his travel mug. The back of the van was packed with boxes, their familiar blue smile logos staring back at him as he reviewed his first stops. Lucas tapped the screen of his handheld scanner, and the device chirped to life, displaying the day's route. A mix of residential and commercial stops awaited him, 20 packages in total. He took a sip of coffee, adjusted his cap, and pulled out of the distribution center. By noon, the Texas sun was relentless. Lucas had already worked his way through half the route, his cooler of water bottles sitting nearly empty on the passenger seat. Sweat clung to the back of his neck as he rolled into the quiet, tree-lined neighborhood of Winchester Drive. The houses here were almost identical. Two-story homes with neatly trimmed lawns and driveways big enough for 2 SUVs. The kind of place where neighbors smiled politely but rarely knew each other's names. His scanner beeped, directing him to a house near the end of the cul-de-sac. He parked in the driveway and grabbed the package. A small, rectangular box with a barcode that had seen better days. The label read, "Recipient, Dr. Eleanor Moore. Address, 3947 Winchester Drive." Lucas didn't think much of it. Doctors and professors were common recipients on his routes, often getting obscure books or medical equipment. He walked up to the door, placed the package neatly on the welcome mat, and snapped a photo for confirmation. But when he went to mark the delivery as complete, his scanner buzzed. Delivery failed. Return to sender. Lucas frowned. The package was right there, undamaged and exactly where it needed to be. He tapped the screen, trying to clear the error, but the scanner refused to cooperate. The usual blue interface flickered, replaced by a dull red glow. A strange symbol appeared on the screen, a triangle inside a circle, faintly pulsing. "What the hell?" Lucas muttered, tapping the scanner again. The device buzzed in his hand, and his eyes widened as the package itself began to hum faintly. He stared at it, unsure if the heat was making him hallucinate. The box vibrated slightly, the faint sound barely audible over the cicadas buzzing in the trees. Lucas crouched, reaching out tentatively. The air around the package felt strange, warmer, charged, like the static before a lightning storm. Then he noticed something even stranger. The house in front of him flickered. Not the lights, those were off. The entire structure seemed to shimmer, as though it were a reflection on a disturbed pond. Lucas blinked hard, his brain struggling to make sense of what he was seeing. For a split second, the house disappeared entirely, replaced by an empty lot. When it reappeared, the package in front of him had changed. The label no longer displayed 3947 Winchester Drive. Instead, it was printed with coordinates: 29.7604 degrees north, 95.3698 degrees west. Lucas's pulse quickened. Those numbers were familiar, coordinates for downtown Houston. He glanced back at his van, where the afternoon sun glinted off the windshield. Everything about this moment screamed at him to leave, drop the package, mark it as undeliverable, and get on with his day. But curiosity got the better of him. With a deep breath, Lucas picked up the package and carried it back to the van. As soon as he placed it on the passenger seat, the scanner buzzed again. Route recalculated. Proceed to new destination. The coordinates led Lucas to an area he hadn't visited in years, an abandoned office complex on the outskirts of downtown. The once thriving business park had fallen into disrepair, its windows boarded up and its parking lot overgrown with weeds. Lucas drove slowly, the sound of gravel crunching beneath his tires. The complex loomed ahead, its skeletal remains casting long shadows across the lot. His GPS chimed, announcing that he had arrived, but there was no one in sight. He parked near what looked like the main entrance and stepped out, the package tucked under his arm. The scanner buzzed insistently, the red triangle symbol flashing faster now. "Where am I supposed to deliver this?" he muttered, scanning the desolate surroundings. As he walked farther into the lot, he noticed something unusual near the center. A circular platform embedded in the ground. It was metallic, its surface smooth and unblemished despite the decay surrounding it. Lucas approached cautiously, his boots scuffing against the cracked pavement. The scanner buzzed louder as he neared the platform, almost like it was urging him forward. He placed the package on the platform and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. The package sat there, unremarkable against the gleaming metal. Lucas exhaled, ready to chalk this up to a malfunction and head back to the van. But then the platform began to hum. A ring of light surrounded the package, growing brighter with each pulse. The air grew thick, and Lucas felt the hair on his arms stand on end. The light intensified, and the package vanished. Not like it had been picked up or transported. It simply blinked out of existence. Lucas stumbled backward, his mind reeling. He stared at the platform, now silent and still, as if nothing had happened. His scanner buzzed again, pulling his attention back to the device. The red triangle symbol was gone, replaced by a single word: proceed. Lucas returned to his van in a daze. The drive back to the distribution center was a blur, the events replaying in his mind over and over. He handed in his keys, filed his reports, and tried to convince himself that he had imagined it all. But later that night, as he sat on his couch scrolling aimlessly through his phone, the scanner beeped again. A new set of coordinates appeared on the screen. Lucas stared at the glowing numbers, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He knew that he should ignore it, toss the scanner in the trash, and forget everything that had happened. But the pull of curiosity was stronger than fear. Against every instinct, Lucas grabbed his jacket, pocketed the scanner, and headed out the door. The new coordinates pulled Lucas into the outskirts of Houston, far from the tidy suburbs and busy city streets he knew. His GPS screen glowed faintly in the darkened cab of his van, guiding him along narrow, unmarked roads that snaked through dense woods. The headlights cut through the night, illuminating gnarled tree branches that clawed at the edges of the road. The unease he'd felt earlier in the day had settled into a gnawing tension in his chest. The scanner, still clutched in his hand, pulsed faintly with a dim red light. Every few minutes, it buzzed, a soft, insistent reminder that he was being led somewhere. Just one more stop, Lucas muttered to himself. Figure out what's going on, then I'm done. After an hour of driving, the road ended abruptly in a clearing. He parked the van and stepped out, the cool night air brushing against his face. The forest around him was unnervingly quiet. No rustling leaves, no chirping crickets, just a heavy, oppressive silence. Lucas shone his flashlight ahead, its beams sweeping across the clearing. At the center stood an enormous structure, a towering archway made of black stone. The surface of the arch seemed to absorb the light, its edges unnervingly sharp. Strange symbols were etched into the stone, glowing faintly with an otherworldly green light. The scanner in his hand buzzed, its screen displaying a single word: proceed. Lucas hesitated, his instinct screaming at him to turn back. But the pull of curiosity was too strong. Against his better judgment, he stepped closer to the archway. The air grew denser as he approached, humming faintly with a strange energy. The symbols on the arch began to shift, rearranging themselves in patterns that made his head ache to look at. "What is this place?" he whispered. The arch responded. A low hum rose from its base, growing louder with each passing second. The space within the archway rippled like water, and then, without warning, a vortex of light and shadow erupted, swirling with a chaotic beauty that defied comprehension. Lucas stumbled back, shielding his face from the blinding glow. The vortex pulsed, its energy reaching out like invisible tendrils that seemed to brush against his skin. Before he could react, the scanner buzzed violently in his hand. The red triangle symbol flashed, accompanied by new text. "Step through." Lucas shook his head, his heart racing. "No way," he muttered. But as he backed away, the vortex pulsed again, this time pulling at him with an almost magnetic force. He felt his feet sliding forward, the ground beneath him shifting unnaturally. The pull grew stronger, and before he could stop himself, Lucas was yanked into the swirling chaos. The sensation was indescribable. It wasn't like falling or flying. It was both and neither. Time and space seemed to fold around him, collapsing into an endless spiral of light and shadow. Lucas's body felt weightless, yet every nerve was alive with sensation. When the world finally solidified, he landed hard on the ground, the impact jarring him back to reality. He gasped for air, his chest heaving as he looked around. He wasn't in Houston anymore. The landscape stretched endlessly in every direction, an alien expanse of dark, cracked earth that shimmered faintly under a sky that defied explanation. Above him, galaxies swirled in brilliant hues of blue, purple, and gold. Stars blinked and burned, some moving as though alive, while others collapsed into themselves in silent explosions. The ground beneath him felt warm, almost alive, and the air buzzed faintly with an electric hum. In the distance, massive structures rose from the horizon, towering spires of twisting metal and glass that seemed to defy gravity. Lucas staggered to his feet, his legs trembling. He looked down at the scanner in his hand, its screen now displaying a new message. "Deliver." Confused, he glanced at the other hand and froze. The package was back. The same small box, its barcode intact, rested in his palm as if it had never disappeared. Lucas's pulse quickened as he stared at it, dread pooling in his stomach. "What am I delivering?" he muttered under his breath. He turned toward the distant spires, their impossible geometry both terrifying and mesmerizing. The scanner buzzed, its screen flashing an arrow that pointed straight ahead. Lucas had no choice. He began to walk. The journey felt endless. The ground shifted beneath his feet, occasionally glowing faintly as if responding to his presence. The stars above seemed to shift and rearrange themselves, forming patterns that he couldn't decipher. As he approached the spires, he realized they weren't just structures, they were alive. Pulsing veins of light ran through their surfaces, and faint whispers emanated from them, too soft to understand. The scanner buzzed again, and Lucas stopped in his tracks. A figure stood ahead of him. It was humanoid but not human, its body composed of shimmering, translucent light. It moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, its limbs flowing like liquid. The figure extended a hand, its face expressionless. Lucas froze, unsure of what to do. The scanner buzzed louder, displaying a single word: "Approach." His instincts screamed at him to turn back, but the magnetic pull of the figure was undeniable. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped closer. When he was within arm's reach, the figure tilted its head and pointed at the package in his hand. Lucas hesitated, his heart pounding. "Is this what you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It simply held out its hand, waiting. Taking a deep breath, Lucas extended the package. The moment it left his grip, the figure dissolved, the package floating in midair. A surge of light erupted from the box, enveloping the area in a brilliant glow. Lucas shielded his eyes, his body trembling as the ground beneath him began to quake. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was blinding. And then, darkness. Lucas opened his eyes to find himself lying on the ground, back in the clearing. The archway loomed over him, silent and still. The scanner in his hand buzzed faintly, its screen now blank. The package was gone. For a long moment, he just lay there, staring up at the stars through the trees. His body ached, and his mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. He didn't have any answers, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Lucas sat in his van, staring at the scanner in his hand. He was back in Houston, parked on the edge of a quiet neighborhood, but the weight of what had just happened pressed on him like a lead blanket. The archway, the shimmering figure, the alien expanse. All of it felt like a fever dream. Yet the faint ache in his muscles and the buzzing silence of the scanner reminded him it was all real. The package was gone. He had delivered it. But to who, or what, and why? The screen of the scanner flickered faintly, displaying nothing but static. Lucas tapped it half-heartedly, knowing it wouldn't respond. The van's dashboard clock read 7:12 p.m., though he had no idea how much time had passed since he'd stepped through the archway. His mind raced with questions. Who was Dr. Eleanor Moore? Why had her package led him to an alien world? And what was inside the box? The answers didn't come. Instead, the scanner buzzed once more. Recalibrating, Lucas tensed, watching as the screen blinked back to life. Coordinates appeared again, accompanied by a new message. Route incomplete. Retrieve. Retrieve, he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. He leaned back in his seat, exhaling sharply. No way. I'm done. But the scanner wouldn't stop buzzing. The coordinates flashed insistently, and Lucas felt the now familiar pull of curiosity gnawing at him. Against his better judgment, he plugged the coordinates into his GPS. The new route led him to the industrial district on Houston's east side, a stretch of abandoned warehouses and shipping yards. The van's headlights illuminated the crumbling facades of old brick buildings and rusted fences as he followed the directions. The GPS guided him to a warehouse at the end of a deserted street. Its massive steel doors were shut, and the windows were covered in grime. A faint light flickered inside, barely visible through the cracks. Lucas parked the van and stepped out, the scanner buzzing steadily in his hand. He approached the doors cautiously, pushing one open with a loud groan of metal. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint hum of electricity. The warehouse was vast, its high ceilings disappearing into shadow. Rows of machinery sat silent and rusting, their original purpose long forgotten. But in the center of the room, something was alive. A circular device stood on a raised platform, its surface made of the same black stone as the archway he had encountered earlier. Symbols glowed faintly along its edges, and a column of light rose from its center, reaching toward the ceiling. The scanner in Lucas's hand buzzed louder, its screen flashing a single word. Activate. Lucas hesitated, his gut twisting with apprehension. But something about the device felt familiar, as though it were connected to the archway and to the package he had delivered. He stepped onto the platform, his boots echoing against the stone. The column of light pulsed, and the scanner vibrated violently in his hand. "All right," he muttered. "Let's see what happens." He held the scanner up to the column, and the symbols along the device's edges began to shift and glow. The light intensified, enveloping the room in a brilliant white that forced Lucas to close his eyes. When he opened them, he was no longer in the warehouse. Lucas found himself in what looked like a control room, though it bore no resemblance to any human technology he had ever seen. The walls were sleek and metallic, lined with screens that displayed endless streams of data in languages he couldn't comprehend. A massive console sat at the center of the room, its surface covered in glowing symbols and shifting patterns. Standing behind it was a figure, tall and humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Its body was composed of shimmering light, just like the figure he had encountered at the archway. But this one seemed more solid, more deliberate in its movements. It turned to face Lucas, its glowing eyes locking onto him with an intensity that made his breath catch. The alien raised a hand, and the scanner in Lucas's grip flew out of his hand, landing on the console. "Human," the alien said, its voice resonating in Lucas's mind rather than his ears. "You are the courier." Lucas took a step back, his heart racing. "What's going on? What did I deliver?" The alien tilted its head, the glow of its eyes dimming slightly. "You delivered a key. A fragment of what was stolen." "Stolen?" Lucas echoed, his voice trembling. The alien gestured to the screens around the room, which shifted to display images of Earth. He saw the familiar outline of continents, overlaid with glowing lines that pulsed faintly. "Time is a circuit," the alien explained. "A loop that sustains reality. Your world exists within it, bound by its flow." The screens shifted again, showing cracks splintering across the glowing lines. "But the circuit has been broken," the alien continued. "Fragments of time have been removed, disrupting the flow. If the circuit is not repaired, all realities will collapse." Lucas's throat tightened. "And the package? That was one of the fragments?" The alien nodded. "Correct. There are others." The weight of the alien's words settled heavily on Lucas's shoulders. He wasn't just a delivery driver anymore. Somehow, he had been pulled into a cosmic struggle to save time itself. The alien stepped closer, its luminous form towering over him. "Your task is not complete, human. The circuit must be restored." Lucas shook his head, his voice cracking. "Why me? I'm just a guy who drives a van. I'm not supposed to be part of this." "You were chosen," the alien said simply. "The tools you carry, the paths you follow, they are not accidents." Before Lucas could respond, the light in the room grew brighter, and the alien raised its hand. "Go now, courier. The next key awaits." The world dissolved around him, and Lucas was pulled into the void once more. When Lucas opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the alien control room. The world around him was vast and unfamiliar, a place where the edges of reality seemed to blur and ripple like water disturbed by an unseen force. The ground beneath his feet was smooth and dark, dotted with faintly glowing veins of light that pulsed rhythmically. The sky above him was a chaotic swirl of stars, galaxies, and voids, shifting and rearranging themselves as though time itself were alive. In the distance, towering structures rose into the shimmering sky, spires of impossible geometry that twisted and looped back into themselves. They pulsed with the same glow as the veins beneath him, their light dimming and flaring in time with the beat of the world. The scanner in Lucas's hand buzzed, pulling his attention down. Its screen displayed a new message. "Final key. Retrieve." His chest tightened. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to stop, to turn back, to let someone else take on this impossible burden. But deep down, he knew there was no one else. Lucas took a deep breath and started walking toward the spires. The path was unnervingly quiet, the only sound the faint hum of the glowing veins beneath his feet. The closer he got to the spires, the more distorted the world became. The ground rippled as though it were liquid, and the stars above flickered and rearranged themselves in patterns he couldn't understand. Time felt wrong here. Lucas couldn't tell if he had been walking for minutes or hours when he finally reached the base of the central spire. It loomed above him, its surface covered in shifting symbols that seemed to watch him as he approached. At the center of the spire was a doorway, its frame made of the same black stone as the archway he had encountered before. A faint, pulsing light emanated from within, casting long shadows across the alien landscape. The scanner buzzed again, displaying a single word: "Enter." Lucas hesitated, his hand trembling as he reached for the doorway. The air around it buzzed with energy, making his skin prickle. He took one last deep breath and stepped inside. The interior of the spire was a maze of glowing corridors, each one twisting and branching in ways that defied logic. Lucas followed the scanner's guidance, its screen displaying arrows that shifted with every turn he took. As he moved deeper into the spire, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The air grew heavier, and the hum of the glowing veins grew louder, resonating in his chest like a second heartbeat. Finally, he reached the core. The room was massive, its walls covered in shifting patterns of light. At the center stood a pedestal, and on it rested the final key, a small, crystalline shard that pulsed with a faint, golden light. The scanner in Lucas's hand buzzed violently, its screen flashing. "Restore the circuit." He stepped closer, his heart pounding. The air around the shard was dense with energy, each step forward growing harder as though the world itself were trying to stop him. When he finally reached the pedestal, he hesitated. His fingers hovered over the shard, trembling. "What happens if I do this?" he muttered, though he knew no one could answer. He thought of the alien's words, the images of Earth splintering into fragments. He thought of the package, of the strange figure he had encountered, and of the endless expanse of worlds and timelines he had glimpsed. And then he thought of home. He thought of his small apartment, the smell of fresh coffee in the mornings, the hum of his van as it carried him through the streets of Houston. He thought of the simple, ordinary life he had left behind, and the weight of knowing it would all disappear if he failed. With a deep breath, Lucas reached out and grabbed the shard. The moment his fingers touched it, the world exploded into light. Lucas felt his body pulled in every direction at once, his mind bombarded with images and sensations. He saw fragments of time, moments from his own life and countless others, flashing by in an endless stream. He saw the birth of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations, the branching paths of choices that created infinite realities. He saw a version of himself delivering packages in a pristine, futuristic city, and another version standing on the ruins of a shattered Earth. The shard grew hotter in his hand, its light burning brighter as the images accelerated. Then, a voice spoke, not in words, but in his mind, resonating with a clarity that silenced everything else. The circuit must be whole. Lucas's body moved on instinct, guided by the voice. He raised the shard above his head, and the light from it erupted, spreading through the room and into the walls. The glowing veins of the spire flared to life, their light surging outward in waves. The patterns on the walls shifted, aligning into perfect symmetry. And then, the world shattered. Lucas woke to the sound of his van's engine humming softly. His eyes snapped open, and he found himself parked in front of a modest house on Winchester Drive. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawn. He blinked, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The scanner sat on the passenger seat, its screen displaying his route. The packages in the back of the van were neatly arranged, just as they had been that morning. For a moment, Lucas wondered if it had all been a dream. But as he reached for the scanner, he noticed something strange. The final delivery was marked as complete. His heart raced as he scrolled through the route history, looking for any evidence of what he had experienced. But there was nothing. No archway, no spire, no alien world. Just a list of ordinary addresses, marked with Amazon's familiar blue smile. Lucas sat back in his seat, his mind spinning. He looked out the window at the house in front of him, wondering if he had imagined everything. But as he started the van and pulled away, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. The world looked the same, yet it felt different, sharper, clearer, as though the air itself buzzed with new energy. And when he glanced at the scanner one last time, he saw a faint, pulsing symbol on the screen, a triangle within a circle. Lucas smiled faintly, his grip on the wheel tightening as he drove into the fading light. The circuit was complete, but he knew the journey wasn't over. Not yet.